Every evening, I would call my deceased son home for dinner, until the day I found the suicide note he wrote. My name is Alara. I'm over 80 years old, living alone in this old stone house, nestled on the hillside of a small village. My husband, Antoine, passed away a long time ago. My two older children, Clara and Mathis, have both gone far away, each to a different corner of the world. My life has shrunk to old habits. Every afternoon, when the clock strikes 6, I begin my ritual. I go into the dining room and carefully set the table. Not for one person, but for two. I take out 2 white porcelain plates, 2 sets of silver cutlery, and 2 crystal glasses. I place them neatly and symmetrically on the old oak table. One place for me, and one place, opposite me, for Leo, my youngest son. After everything is ready, I lean on my wooden cane and slowly walk out onto the porch. I stand there, looking toward the path leading into the village, and call out. A call that has become a habit. Leo, Leo, my son, come home for dinner. My voice echoes in the silent afternoon air and then fades away. There is no reply, there never is. But tomorrow, at the same time, I will stand here again. I will call out again. That is my way. It's my way of keeping him alive, at least in this house. After my call dissolves into silence, I stand still for a moment in the doorway. My ears are strained, waiting for a reply, a sign of some kind. But there is nothing, only the steady ticking of the wall clock, counting down the empty seconds. I turn back inside. The door closes behind me with a spine-chilling sound. The house sinks into silence again, a thick, suffocating silence. At my age, nothing is more terrifying than being surrounded by 4 silent walls. I walk slowly toward the fireplace. The old ashes have long gone cold, but I still sit down next to it, as if a little warmth from our full family dinners might remain there. My hand trembles slightly as it glides over the old stacked photo frames on the shelf. These photos are now the only way for me to meet my children again. The children who used to chatter in this house. The children I spent my whole life raising and protecting. And now, they have their own worlds, worlds that don't need me. I pick up a photo of Clara. In the picture, she is standing by the Big Ben Tower, holding her husband's hand, next to their small son. All 3 are smiling brightly. I look at it for a long time. That smile feels so distant. That life also feels distant. I try to search my memory, to find the last time Clara smiled at me like that. The image that comes back is vague. The face is unclear. I only remember a clear laugh somewhere in the backyard, but all of it is too far away. Then there's Mathis. In his frame, he's wearing a white sailor uniform, his lean body standing alone on a ship's deck. I place my hand on his face. The glass frame is cold. He chose the sea, just like his father. Perhaps it was to escape the oppressive silence of this house. In the middle of the two is a photo of Leo. I freeze, staring intently into the eyes in the photo, as if they are looking back at me. I don't dare to touch it. Instead, I reach for a postcard placed closest, on top of a stack of old letters. It's from London, Clara's handwriting. I've read it countless times, yet every time I open it, my heart still aches. Mom, we're doing well. Hope you are too. Clara, that's all, short, impersonal. It feels more like an announcement than a check-in. I sigh. When children grow up, they think that as long as they are okay, their parents will be too. I tell myself that they are busy with their own lives. It's a lie I repeat every day to soothe myself. As long as they are safe and happy, then I'm happy. I still try to believe that. I put the postcard back in its place. My hands are trembling a little. I try to brush away the feeling of emptiness that is seeping into my chest. I slump into the chair, my eyes on the flickering lamp at the end of the room. The wall of forgetting I built around myself is still standing strong, at least, for now. A few days later, I was fussing over some herb pots on the porch when I heard the sound of a bicycle stopping at the gate. Isabel, the village florist, had stopped by again. She usually brings me flowers every weekend, but today she came earlier. "Mrs. Alara, I brought you some flowers," she called out, her voice bright and clear. I turned around and saw her holding a bouquet of white daisies. I took the flowers, and the scent of daisies wafted onto the porch, light but persistent. Isabel stood there, her face radiant, but her eyes seemed to be sparkling with something she was hiding in her heart. Then she spoke, as if quickly, for fear of changing her mind. I'm thinking of renting a shop in the next town over. I want to try to expand, to try my hand in a more crowded place. My smile vanished right then. I grabbed her hand, perhaps a little too tightly. Isabel, ambition only brings trouble. The world out there is big, but it's very dangerous. Staying in this village, living a simple life, that is true happiness. I still remember her face at that moment. Her smile faded, replaced by an awkward, uncomfortable look. She pulled her hand away, mumbled a thank you, then quickly turned around, got on her bicycle, and rode off. I stood frozen on the porch, holding the bouquet of white daisies in my hands. It was then that I realized what I had just done. The words I spoke to Isabel weren't to protect her, but to vent my own fear. I had turned my fear of loss, my fear of the world outside, into a philosophy of life. A philosophy I had used my whole life to hold my children close to me. The problem was never just Leo. The problem started with me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, and in my ears, my own voice still echoed from that afternoon when I tightly held Isabel's hand. The words I had uttered to her were like a slow knock reverberating from deep within my chest. They reminded me of something I had been trying to bury for so long. I closed my eyes, trying to find sleep. But the tighter I closed them, the clearer the images became. They were no longer blurred phantoms. They were sharp, like broken glass shards cutting into my mind. First was Leo's face. A face so angry that his eyes seemed to glow red, right here in this living room, the day he tremblingly held his acceptance letter from the Paris School of Art. I remember every fold on that paper, as if they were printed directly into my memory. He had screamed, "Why won't you let me go? Why do you want me to die in this village? This isn't the life I want." I could hear the sound of the chair hitting the floor, the door slamming shut, and the thick silence that followed, when I was left alone, dazed, in the room. Then the image shifted to Clara. She stood right in front of the door, her hand tightly gripping her suitcase handle, her breath coming in short gasps. For the first time in my life, I saw her look at me as if I were a stranger. "This is my life, not yours," she screamed, her voice cracking, then turned her back and walked away with her husband. I could still hear the car engine starting, getting fainter and fainter, leaving a cold void in the house. And finally, Mathis. There was no argument. Not a single word was said. Only his lean back under the dim light of dawn. The duffel bag slung over his shoulder swayed with every step. He walked out of the gate and didn't look back. No goodbye. He chose the sea, just like his father. I sat up, gasping for air, my hands clutching the bedsheets as if I could keep myself from sinking completely into the nightmare. My heart was pounding, each beat so strong, I feared I would collapse right there. Cold sweat trickled down my spine, soaking my white hair. "It's just a nightmare," I whispered, clutching my chest, trying to soothe myself. "Just bad dreams." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It wasn't a dream. It was a memory. It was the fragments of truth I had tried to lock away behind the wall of forgetting. I could feel the cracks spreading, the layers of bricks peeling away. My brain strained, fighting, as if trying to fill them back in, to push those memories back into the darkness, but it was useless. Once they came back, they would not disappear again. And I knew, soon enough, the wall I had built my whole life would collapse. The fragmented memories from that night haunted me. To drive them away, the next day, I decided to clean Leo's room. It had been 10 years since he passed away, and I had barely touched anything in there. Everything was kept exactly as it was, like a silent tomb. As I was dusting the old bookshelf, my eyes landed on an oak chest, neatly placed under the bed. It was the chest Leo used to store his art supplies. I had deliberately not touched it for the past 10 years. Opening it would be like having to admit that he had truly gone. But today, something was different. It wasn't curiosity. It was an invisible force, a compulsion that I had to face it. I knelt down, my hands trembling as I opened the rusted lock. The lid of the chest slowly opened. The familiar smell of old paper and charcoal wafted up. The top layer was Leo's unfinished sketches, portraits of the villagers, scenes of Provence. His drawings were so talented, so vivid, and tucked between the drawings was a yellowed envelope. I carefully took it out. It was the acceptance letter from the National School of Art in Paris. The memory of our last argument flooded back, this time not in fragments, but as a storm. I remembered every word, every look. I remembered his anger when I refused, and the despair in his eyes when he realized that the prison I had created was inescapable. My hands trembling, I placed the acceptance letter to the side and continued to look inside the chest. Below the drawings was something I never expected. Old, faded letters, tied together with a string. I recognized Clara's handwriting on the first envelope. It was the letter she had left on the dining table the day she left for London. "Mom, I love you, but I can't breathe in this house anymore. I have to go to save myself and my love. Please don't think I betrayed you." Below that was Mathis's letter, written on a crumpled piece of paper. "You always said the sea took Dad away. But it's your own fear that's drowning us. I choose the sea, because there I am free." And then, in the final layer, at the bottom of the chest, was the last and most painful piece of the puzzle. A small newspaper clipping from the local paper, the headline still clear: "Tragic accident on the mountain pass." Next to it was a short suicide note, written in Leo's shaky handwriting, perhaps right before he left on that fateful night. "I have to go, Mom. I can't live like this forever. I'm going to Paris. I'll become a painter and make you proud. I promise." I collapsed onto the cold floor, the chest wide open in front of me. The wall of forgetting that I had so carefully built over the past 10 years had completely crumbled. Now, all the pieces fit together. It wasn't just Leo. It was all of them. Clara, Mathis, Leo. My fear of loss in the name of love, had become a prison. It had stifled their dreams and pushed all my children away. Clara and Mathis were luckier. They found a way to escape. As for Leo, the youngest son I loved the most, the one I held the tightest, he paid with his life for that final attempt at escape. My tragedy wasn't that I lost a child in an accident. My tragedy was that I single-handedly tore my family apart. It was me, and no one else, who caused all of this. That evening, I no longer called out Leo, "Come home for dinner." That fake ritual was over. Instead, I went into the dining room and began to set the table. Not for 2 people, but for the whole family. I placed Leo's favorite porcelain plate in the center position. To the left, I placed the only postcard Clara had sent back this year. To the right, I placed a large conch shell, a gift Mathis had sent from some distant sea a long time ago. And at the head of the table was my place. This was the first dinner in many years where my whole family was truly present, a dinner for all the children I had hurt. I sat alone among those mementos, in the silence of the house. I didn't cry. Tears were no longer enough to express the regret that was tormenting me. "Clara," I whispered to the postcard. "Mathis," I said to the seashell. "Leo." I looked at the empty plate. I was wrong. My voice broke. I was wrong my whole life. "I'm sorry, my children." Those weren't words spoken to those who had passed on. It was the first, most honest confession to my own conscience. The wall of forgetting had crumbled, and now I had to learn to live with its ruins. The next morning, I woke up as the first light of day peeked through the curtains. The house was as quiet as always, but in that silence, I felt something had changed. It was no longer the heavy silence of forgetting, of stubborn avoidance. It was more like a waiting silence, a silence of acceptance. I sat up slowly. My feet were used to walking straight to the chair by the window, sitting and looking out at the empty road, but this morning, I didn't. I stopped in the middle of the room, looking around. The light swept over the old photo frames, over the cold fireplace, and then stopped at my husband's writing desk, the desk that had been forgotten for many years. I walked closer. The wooden drawer was a little stuck, making a dry, creaking sound as I pulled it out. Inside, there were still a few sheets of ivory-colored letter paper, yellowed with age, and an old fountain pen, its cap scratched. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It had been a long time since I had felt this. The feeling of preparing to write a real letter, not just a few short lines on a postcard, not a polite phone call. I sat down and spread the paper on the desk. With the pen in my hand, I suddenly felt choked up. What should I write? A long apology? A justification for the mistakes? For the years I had driven my children away? I thought of hundreds of ways to start, but none of them felt right. I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a strange sense of anticipation. And then, as if someone whispered in my ear, I knew what I needed to write. Not a complaint. Not a long-winded story. Just a question. A simple question that I had owed my children for so long. I bent down, putting the pen to the paper, the dark blue ink seeping into the rough fibers of the ivory paper. "Clara, my daughter," I wrote, my hand still shaking. "How are you?" After sealing the letter, I sat in silence for a long time. The small envelope lay on the desk, but to me, it felt like a heavy stone. I stared at the still wet blue ink, my finger lightly touching the words to Clara. It had been so long since I had written that name with my own hand. I put on a thick wool sweater, an old, worn-out one, but warm enough for a chilly morning. I didn't call anyone to come with me. I didn't want to ask for help. I leaned on my oak cane, took a deep breath, and slowly walked out of the house. The door closed behind me with a creak, echoing in the stillness of the early village morning. The road to the post office wasn't far. I had walked it for so many years, but this morning, every meter seemed longer. My old feet felt heavy, each step slow, my breathing more labored than usual. I walked past the small bridge, where the stream flowed, listening to the water's gurgle as if it were whispering something. I walked past the line of trees along the roadside, where my children used to run and play. Everything seemed the same, but I was different. Every step I took this morning carried a meaning I had never known before. When I reached the post office, I stopped for a long time. The yellow mailbox, its paint chipped and streaked with rust, stood there like an old witness. I clutched the letter tightly in my hand, and for a moment, it felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. My whole body trembled. I don't know if it was from the cold wind or from the feeling that was overwhelming me. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and slowly raised my hand. When the edge of the letter slipped through the narrow slot of the mailbox, I heard a soft clunk. That small sound, to me, was like a stone being thrown into a calm lake, creating the first ripple. A ripple that I knew would spread, even if I didn't know where it would go. I stood there, my hand still on the mailbox, my heart empty. I didn't know if Clara would ever open the letter. I didn't know if the letter could change anything. But perhaps that no longer mattered. What mattered was that I had done something I hadn't dared to do for so long. Instead of sitting quietly behind the window, calling into an empty space, for the first time in many years, I had actively reached out to my child, even if it was just with a thin piece of paper. On the way back, I suddenly realized something. I had just stepped out of the prison I had built for myself for so many years. When I returned, I didn't go straight into the house. I stopped on the doorstep, my hand on the door, but I didn't open it. My heart was still beating fast from the journey. I stepped back and sat down on the old wooden chair on the porch, the chair that was faded from the weather, the chair where for so many years I sat in the darkness, calling Leo's name, calling endlessly into the void. But today, my eyes no longer drifted into the empty space. I took a deep breath, looked up at the pale gray sky, and for the first time, I felt I was no longer just sitting and waiting. I stood up and walked into Leo's room. The small room still held the scent of old paper and wood dust. On the bookshelf, I took out his sketchbook, the book I had found in the chest, but never had the courage to look at closely. This time, I brought it back to the porch, placed it on my lap, and carefully turned each page. The pencil lines were clear. I looked at them slowly, and for the first time, I didn't just look. I saw the talent in every line. I saw his love for this village, The tanned faces of the fishermen, the scenes of small boats docking, the narrow gravel roads he walked every day. Everything appeared like another world, the world Leo had tried to build for himself, a world I had never been willing to step into. The last page made my hand stop. It was an unfinished sketch. A face appeared, still incomplete, but I recognized it immediately. It was me. Me sitting and knitting by the window, my head slightly bowed, the threads hanging loosely in my hands. Below the drawing, a small, trembling pencil note. Mom. I instinctively reached out and lightly touched the words. Something warm spread through my chest. Tears welled up, but I held them back. Instead, for the first time in a long, desperate time, a gentle, fragile smile appeared on my lips. I don't know if Clara will reply to my letter. I also don't know if Mathis will ever return from the sea. Perhaps not. But I realized that it no longer weighed on me as it did before, because I had started another journey, a journey of atonement, a journey to find the invisible thread that had been cut for too long. Instead of waiting for a phantom in vain, I had planted a seed of hope in the real world, a small seed that could sprout at any time. The house around me was still silent. No footsteps, no laughter, no hechos. But this silence was different. It was no longer the cold silence of forgetting. It was the gentle silence of peace and of waiting. Waiting for a new beginning.